Hello everyone, this is part 13 of What If Naruto Was in the 7 Ninja Swordsman, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Tobirama found himself camouflaged inside a thick forest of trees that surrounded the pirate base. From his current position, he and the Kiri ninja around him could easily see the entire base, recording every movement of the enemy. Their platoon leader, Haku, stood still as a rock. But the young girl's unflinching gaze showed a resolve to see her mission through. When both of them spotted faint silhouettes of Naruto's scout team flying towards the center of the base under the cover of the night, they knew it was time. Get ready. Those that were here along with the others members of their platoon spread across the entire island formed a secured perimeter quickly by silencing seals on the designated checkpoints. Tobirama watched Haku perform her own set of hand seals before it against the seal she had placed on her own tree. It glowed brightly for 1 millisecond, followed by similar fading sparks occurring across the entire island in a circular perimeter that was set up. That was when the first of the bombs were dropped. Tobirama could only watch in silent admiration and slight fear as the scout team dropped their poison bombs one after another across the barracks and the docks, unleashing a wave of terror and chaos across the entire enemy camp. The barracks were much less of a cruel scene, as most of its occupants were asleep at this late hour and were before they even realized what had happened. A handful stronger ones, or those that were not asleep yet, managed to storm outside in a hurry only to be pinned against the walls of their barracks with AK lodged in their head, courtesy of the scout team that was ready to mop up any such lucky survivors from the sky. While he could not see what was happening in the harbor, Tobirama could feel several chakra signatures active in that zone, indicating the 3 Kiri platoons had also launched their attack from that direction, led by their respective swordsmen. Just when the enemy thought they had grasped the worst of their situation, the eastern and western gates were breached. Masked commandos led by Mangetsu and Kisame stormed in from each respective direction, putting down every standing body in their path. It didn't matter whether the person was a man or woman, old or young, heavily or lightly armed. Naturally, quite a few of the pirates realized the futility of resistance, watching as every second more and more of their comrades were dropping A few had tried charging at the enemy only to be riddled with K by the commandos without even getting close. The handful that could use chakra were more successful in getting closer to the enemies, but only met a gruesome end at the hands of Mangetsu and Kisame, who shred those brave fools in half or worse. With the enemy in the open nearly wiped out, the commandos started for the next target. Swiftly they stacked up against the tavern where quite a few of the pirates had taken shelter and were preparing to mount a counter-offensive. The 501st Commandos threw several smoke bombs through the window before breaking through the door. High right. Neutralized. Behind the bar. 1 in the head. Clear left. Clear right. Tobirama could only listen to the swift communication between the commandos that were carrying out their mission quite impressively. Granted, they were not fighting against ninjas, but their efficiency and style of was near flawless. Then the northern gate was reduced to shreds courtesy of a powerful force of wind which sent dozens of its defenders sailing away in various directions. Tobirama could only gawk at the dramatic entrance of his son. He was definitely going in for the terror, as nobody walked into an enemy camp by exploding the front door and strolling in with dark wings on their back. To the terrified defenders, he must have looked like a demon from hell with his red eyes and dark wings, along with that haunting K intent. The entire camp was collapsing from every direction, with the survivors having no choice but to run for their lives. One such group found itself running exactly towards Tobirama's direction. He raised his kunai but was beaten to the punch when a volley of kunai and senbon were fired by Haku and her platoon, which instantly the enemy deserters. Even when their B hit the ground, a second volley was fired over them, putting down the chance of any miraculous survivors. Textbook K praised Haku coldly, earning respectful nods from her commandos at the praise. Similar scenes were taking place all over the island as the rest of her platoon prevented any such deserters from escaping the K zone, ensuring the objective of not leaving behind any enemy combatants alive was met. Everything was going just as planned, yet Tobirama's sensory powers tickled for a moment, which made him frown, something that didn't go unnoticed by the beautiful but swordsmen beside him. What is it? Asked Haku. We may have a perimeter breach from the outside, said Tobirama hesitantly, as he was still not sure of what he had felt just a moment ago. Impossible. We secured the entire island before moving in. Don't you think any of our sentries would have updated us by now? Still, where did you feel this breach happening? Asked Haku cautiously, unwilling to brush aside the concerns of a formidable warrior like the Hokage. She was a censor herself and had not felt what Tobirama had experienced, yet Tobirama's narrowed gaze made her nervous and more on edge. The sea. Haku swiftly turned towards the unending ocean that lay beyond the harbor. 3 of her men had been stationed there to prevent anyone from escaping via the ocean in case Zabuza and the others missed any such enemies. Bird, Falcon, Turtle, status report. Commanded Haku, using the codenames assigned to each operative. Tobirama was further alarmed when they received no response on the communication channel from either of those 3 commandos. Haku tried a few more times but only met with their silence. The Hokage swiftly expanded his sensory powers to its full extent and felt Haku doing the same along with the other commandos in their unit holding similar skill. Ask the nearest team to investigate that sector, advised Tobirama. Crow and Beast, go check on Bird and his group. Be careful and expect hostile contact, ordered Haku. Acknowledged. From the other side of the island, Tobirama felt the chakra signatures of the 2 respective commandos moving in the ordered direction to investigate until they suddenly vanished from his senses completely. Haku must have felt the same as her face lost all color, but before she could react any further the girl found herself tackled swiftly towards the ground courtesy of Tobirama. As they fell, she witnessed 7 of her own men falling alongside them. Tobirama didn't wait for his protectors and instead threw his special kunai in the direction where the attack was coming from. Before Haku could even utter a word of protest, the Hokage vanished. To be honest, these pirates were not even worthy fighters, or maybe he was being unjust towards them considering most of them couldn't even use chakra, had no formal military training, were taken completely by surprise in the middle of the night and were simply no match for the 501st Commandos that were better trained personally by the blonde. He was pleased when he watched the efficiency and coordination with which his men moved. Granted, this mission was not even a proper test of their abilities, but it gave them actual battlefield experience where they worked together as a unit. It was an essential learning lesson before they faced rival special ops from other villages like the Kinkaku from Kumo, Demolitions Unit from Iwa, or the upcoming Anbu factions from Suna, Konoha, or Azu in the future if the latest intel reports were correct. Even if this war led to a lasting peace, he doubted the war in the shadows would ever be over. It had existed long before he was born and would probably continue long after he was gone. Still, it was a long way to go before they were fully capable of facing any threat under any circumstances. The honor of being truly worthy of facing any enemy under the most difficult circumstances could only be attributed to those men that perished nearly a decade ago under his command. He could only imagine how strong they would have become today had they survived. They already were one of the most dangerous unit all those years ago. We're under attack. He raised a surprised eyebrow on hearing Haku's alarmed voice over his channel, making him activate his own line towards the young girl. How many? He asked calmly, curious as to why a bunch of pirates were actually giving her any trouble. Unknown. I've lost 10 men already, watch out, cried Haku fiercely. Naruto heard the explosions over the channel along with the small plume of smoke rising in the sky from the forest where Haku was protecting Tobirama. It was supposed to be the most safest position. Commander, we're pinned inside the harbor. Heavy suppressive fire, reported Zabuza bitterly over a new channel. Suppressive fire. Elaborate, ordered Naruto swiftly, a bad feeling now forming in the pit of his stomach. Seems the enemy may have managed to acquire some of our weapons and flanked us, answered Zabuza furiously. Winter, what the hell happened to your men tasked with defending our perimeter and protecting the backs of our CQC teams? Demanded Naruto furiously, and heard Haku suck in a terrified breath, knowing heads were going to roll if this was a mistake made by anyone in any manner, especially under her command. Naruto felt his heart skip several beats as he contemplated the possibility of an ambush being sprung on his forces. No pirates were strong enough for such a bold move. Was it Madara and his forces? If so, then how the hell did they came to know about this mission despite all the precaution and diversions they had undertaken to keep it a secret? Was there a traitor in his own ranks? So many questions and possibilities, but there was only one course of action that he could take right now. Counterattack. The order resonated across each and every commando from the 501st and their respective leaders. The sheer ferocity in the commander's voice instilled some much-needed boost in the shaken morale of the troops. Platoon 5, reinforce platoons 2, 3, and 4 pinned in the harbor and take the fight back to the enemy. Ordered Naruto. Right away, Commander, replied Mangetsu confidently. Platoon 6, have your men secure the base and prevent any new fronts from opening up. Take care of the wounded and any possible innocents inside this base. I can sense 2 fronts, one in Platoon 1's direction and the other towards the harbor. Once the base is secure, I want half of your men to begin flanking maneuver in both directions while the rest hold this position. Understood, explained Naruto seriously. Very well, said Kisame calmly. With that taken care of, Naruto looked at the sky and was proud to see his scout team of 10 commandos was waiting for him. His dark wings opened fully across his back as he took to the skies, making them follow after him. Commander, we lost sight of the VIP. The man charged in the direction the attack is coming from, reported Haku hesitantly, knowing it was her main responsibility to keep the Hokage safe. She expected a severe rebuke for such a dangerous mistake and was left surprised on hearing something entirely different. I'll take care of him. Focus on the enemy now and minimize your casualties. Counter-charge their position in Delta formation. Ordered Naruto calmly, knowing there was no stopping a man like Tobirama if he was determined to do something. Considering he knew the Harashin had made him a huge liability and an asset at the same time. They couldn't honestly control his movements if he decided to be difficult since he could teleport, but an experienced shinobi like him should know how idiotic his actions were looking right now. Or was there a more grave reason which forced the former Hokage to take such a risky move? It was not the place or time to ponder any further on these questions, which only made him speed up his approach towards the direction where he felt the Hokage's chakra appear. Catching his kunai, the Senju clan head appeared over a small ridge overlooking the forest through a slope. The elevated angle gave a perfect line of sight on his and Haku's last position. The sight of 2 501st commandos pinned against a rock with their B made him understand why no warning ever came from the men posted to guard their rear and flanks across the island. It was also the moment when Tobirama caught sight of their enemy for the first time. It couldn't be. A trio of explosive kunai were instantly released from his hands in a swift manner which headed straight towards the large group of ninjas currently laying heavy fire over Haku's position. 2 of them sensed the incoming danger and turned upward, spotting the Hokage, or more accurately his attack, and quickly fired a hail of kunai from their own kunai launchers, destroying the incoming projectiles in mid-air. Smoke and dust spread in the air from the resulting explosions, and from the ashes emerged a furious Tobirama that descended upon the enemy forces only to watch them calmly scatter in various directions, thereby avoiding him completely. As soon as his feet touched the ground, 4 pillars of dark chakra emerged from each direction across the slope, which soon turned into a raging inferno that was rapidly closing towards the now trapped former Hokage. Tobirama tried to teleport to the nearest marking he had left while on his approach towards this position. To his shock and disbelief, he found himself unable to teleport. His sensory powers quickly focused him in the direction of the 4 flaming pillars currently closing in on him. Within 15 seconds, he would be fried to a crisp. Anti-teleportation seals were supposed to be a concept still existing in theory only. Even Tobirama himself was yet to crack the secrets behind that jutsu even after so many years. Yet he couldn't see any seals planted nearby, nor could he even feel their presence. It was then he looked at the approaching wall of flames from all directions and realized the truth. It's this chakra that is preventing me from making contact with my other teleportation seals. There are no seals acting as the barrier, instead this foul chakra itself is one. His worried gaze tried to think of a way out and was quite relieved when he felt another set of presence enter the area. Water style, water wall. A tidal wave washed over Tobirama's position, drenching the Hokage along with the pillars of flames, threatening to burn him alive. However, it also created a thick wall of steam resulting from the heat. Naruto and his scout team appeared beside the Hokage and adopted a defensive formation around him. The blonde commander considered himself lucky to be able to ease such a powerful attack from a kilometer away. It was only thanks to his men joining their power against his own which made the wave strong enough to reach its target in required time and thereby saving his life. What only made his worries even worse was the alarmed look on his father's face. It was as if the man had seen a ghost. He had not been able to get a clear glimpse of the enemy unlike the Senju leader beside him, but fortunately he saw movement in the mist ahead of them followed by faint shadows appearing on the horizon. The 501st Commandos were quite shocked when their commander took an uncertain step back. The look on his face consisted of nothing but disbelief and fear which only served to alarm them further. They looked ahead and saw a large number of enemies appearing on the other side of the mist slowly. They were wearing dark black full-sleeved t-shirts and similar colored pants, and complemented by matching colored combat boots. Their C were covered in dark-colored armor with faint blue lines, their faces covered by a gas mask with 2 breathing holes extended down the chin. Each of them had twin swords on their backs and their body covered in pouches holding shuriken, smoke bombs, medkits, and entire magazines of kunai for the launcher weapon in their hands, the same that the Kiri commandos were also sporting at present. Their bone-chilling intent and steady combat positions only served to unnerve the Kiri forces further. "You're supposed to be S," whispered Naruto in disbelief. Tobirama watched in stunned silence as the long-deceased Spartan Black Ops commandos remained unmoved despite their former commander's words. It wasn't just a setup or an illusion, as they had the same chakra signatures that Tobirama remembered from their fading corpses on that battlefield all those years ago. The power he felt from them was nothing to underestimate. He could take them on individually with ease, but against a group as large as this, he needed backup. It had taken 20 Kinkaku ninjas to capture him just a few months ago. Spartans. Barely 120 of them had done the impossible in their final mission. They went behind enemy lines on AS mission to rescue Hashirama without any backup from their nation or its allies, managed to free him from the custody of the Kinkaku, escaped from the prison back towards friendly lines only to be surrounded by thousands of Kumo shinobi alongside the Kinkaku and the two-tailed beast. Denied any rescue aid or support, they were left to rest behind enemy lines. Even after being betrayed by their motherland, they stuck to their mission. They chose to make a last stand while allowing Naruto to escape with Hashirama to safety. Each and every one of those 120 souls had perished that night except for the broken commander, but the valiant final stand led to the deaths of hundreds of Kumo shinobi, half the Kinkaku force and the brutal M of the tailed beast. It effectively crushed any further involvement from Kumogakuya in the ongoing war in a few short weeks. Even after such their deeds were lost in history courtesy of their respective nations unwilling to admit to the guilt of sending these shinobi to their deaths and not helping them in their final hour. Now, even after death their souls were not allowed peace and were now being defiled in the vilest form. Tobirama was now able to discern the technique at play here. It was one he had created himself as a last resort in order to turn the tide in a losing war in order to avoid what had happened to the Spartans. Instead of risking young shinobi like that, he would be sending S-warriors to do the same job. K-machines that were unstoppable, uncontrollable except by their master, had no hesitation and an unlimited power to fight for eternity. Edo Tensei. He may have developed this dark kinjutsu but was yet to implement the same in practice himself. The fact that it was being used by someone else was proof that the enemy had managed to infiltrate his clan's personal library inside Konoha and steal the scroll holding the information about the jutsu, or at the very least make a copy. The fact that they were actually able to perform it at such a magnitude spoke volumes about their skill. There could only be one man behind this ambush, and Tobirama dreaded the possibility of facing him in battle if he emerged from the shadows from where he must be controlling these reanimated former Azu shinobi. He hesitantly glanced at his son and was pained to see the heartbroken look on his face. One look in his eye was enough to prove he still felt responsible for the deaths of each and every Spartan standing before him. He may have forgiven himself, but he could never forget. Yet that same shinobi surprised the Hokage again when he closed his eyes and heaved a resigned sigh. "This is real, isn't it?" asked the boy. "This is a jutsu I developed that summons the S back to life through the S of a living soul. Edo Tensei, is what I call it. They cannot be K since they are already S. Physical or mental pain means nothing to do those B, any damage can be healed. Their chakra is near infinite, The only way to stop them is to either force the caster to do it, as him won't stop this dark jutsu either. Or we can seal them, advised Tobirama seriously. Can they see me? Naruto's whisper barely reached Tobirama's ears, but the longing wish in the boy's eyes said it all. They are being completely controlled by the looks of it. They don't even remember they are being controlled, so don't hesitate to defend yourself, as they will go for the K, warned the Hokage. Tobirama's eyes widened when he felt a monstrous K intent being unleashed by his son that brought many 501st commandos to their knees. The Spartan force remained unmoved against their former commander's power spike. Naruto. Stay back, Hokage. This isn't your fight. The Senju clan head narrowed his gaze and frowned heavily at that cold warning. As if understanding his will, the 501st commandos appeared beside the Hokage and adopted a defensive formation around him. Before he could object, another stark presence entered the area that made him take a step back in alarm. He wasn't the only one that felt the shift, as the commandos near him shook nervously as a feeling of absolute despair and suffering fell upon them. Unlike Naruto's power that was burning like an inferno of primal rage, this one radiated an aura of a cold wind that threatened to seep into each shinobi's soul and suck the life out of them all. To their continued horror, many of the trees around them started to wither before their eyes, and they all felt that suffocating power descending upon them. Naruto's counter-flare of dark energy destroyed that threatening presence, much to the relief of his commandos. Except Tobirama's sensory reflexes were screaming at him in alarm. He had clearly felt the power behind Naruto's energy. It was enough to block the incoming offensive energy, but not strong enough to deflect it, which only meant its caster had pulled back himself, out of caution or amusement, was something the Hokage couldn't figure out. As the dying trees were fully reduced to dust, Tobirama gulped as he realized the same would have been their fate had Naruto not stopped that energy he had felt from descending upon them. What was that? He whispered, instantly hating how unnerved his own voice appeared. It's him, answered Naruto bitterly, as he clenched his fists drawing B. The blonde bit his own lip before glancing back the veteran Kage beside him reluctantly. I'm afraid, I'll need your help after all, although I never expected this day to come, said Naruto, his request being directed solely on Tobirama's own communication channel alone. Is that got something to do with this presence I am feeling? Whispered Tobirama, drawing curious glances from the commandos around him, who wanted to know what the two were discussing but were torn between paying attention to that chatter or the dangerous threat right in front of them, ready to pounce at any time. Yes, keep the rest of the Spartans busy with the 501st's help. I'll take care of him. You still haven't answered my question. Is it? His question was see off as thunder rumbled across the sky monstrously and shards of lightning strikes rained down upon the island mercilessly. In that flash of light, Tobirama found himself glancing at a stationary figure floating in the sky. The strongest Spartan, whispered Naruto sadly, anger and pride both mixed in his fleeting confession. I thought you were, whispered the Hokage over the private channel, only for the Namikas to shake his head. I was the fastest. One of the commandos glanced at the sky and was alarmed when he saw the once dark sky erupt into flames instantly. The explosion rendered each and every shinobi blind, and the following shockwave sent all the commandos sailing away like flies. Tobirama was forced to his knees, and he watched Naruto gaze at that burning sky as his dark wings prevented him from flying away like the others by the shockwave. The Hokage's senses were further alarmed when he saw the Spartans take up aggressive stances. The sky was still on fire, and from amidst the flames came a figure that descended towards them at a relaxed pace. Unlike the other Spartans, he was not wearing a mask but only the uniform. He was pale-skinned and had dark red hair with one long banging blocking one of his eyes. Uzumaki. On closer observation, Tobirama was quite surprised to find the young boy having his own pair of dark wings across his back, courtesy of the dark chakra floating all around him. The same one that was also flowing within Naruto's own body. The redhead landed in front of them gracefully, making Naruto avert his gaze. Elder brother. A decade earlier, Ukina Uzumaki flinched and cowered behind her position as thunderous explosions rained all around her, marred with the screams of her comrades that were ripped to shreds at the base of the mountain. She sneaked a peek and was heartbroken on seeing the enemy fleet had been successful. The southern borders leading towards Azu were defended by the Fujima Mountains and the wide sea that was full of whirlpools and dangerous storms. It was considered extremely difficult to invade with high casualty rates for any enemy force, hence the village elders had only deployed a small company of their ninjas to defend this route, leaving the majority of their forces to defend the other more vulnerable directions. Ukina had remembered how horrified her captain had been on learning of how undermanned his entire sector was going to be and had protested fiercely to the leadership, arguing about the grave risk it would be to the village's safety. Ultimately, Captain Daisuke had only been assured of timely and sufficient reinforcements in the event he came under heavy attack from the enemy forces. The 15-year-old Uzumaki Chunin could only curse that decision and her own misfortune when Kumogakure sent 2 entire battalions to invade. For days, their naval ships had bombarded the beach, thereby inflicting casualties, reducing morale and weakening the barrier seals that Captain Daisuke had erected across the coast. Captain Daisuke had called for reinforcements immediately after seeing the gravity of the situation. That had been 10 days ago. Now their beach was overrun courtesy of the enemy successfully turning off the whirlpool storms that had defended the coast as a natural barrier. Azu's leadership had put a lot of unnecessary faith in the natural forces protecting their nation, and the screams of her comrades were a proof of that mistake as the overrun defenders retreated hastily towards the Fujima Mountains, which would serve as their second line of defense now that the beach was overrun. Even now, the enemy ships were bombarding their retreat and the explosions had now reached the slope of the mountain where Ukina's bunker was situated. She dared not venture out into the open and only watched sadly as a Junin was blown in half when one of the bombs launched by the enemy fleet landed a few feet away from him. He was not the only one, as nearly half of the retreating Uzumaki force was knocked off its feet by the following shockwave, much to the delight of the Kumogakure battalion right on their heels. Captain Daisuke saw the horror and turned back towards the direction of the approaching enemy forces along with few of the other surviving Junin. "Go! Save yourselves!" yelled Daisuke fiercely. Many of the younger and injured Uzumaki were jolted out of the shocked daze on hearing their leader's fierce command. They watched him and 7 other Junin form a defensive line between them and the approaching enemy troops. That sight was enough to instill enough courage into Ukina that she jumped out of her bunker and looked at her comrades of the rear guard, currently hiding inside similar bunkers nearby. Save the wounded. She was surprised on hearing the strength and resolve in her own warcry, but it was enough as 7 of her comrades joined her as together they descended down the slope rapidly towards the limping forms of their retreating comrades. Captain Daisuke and his Junins had formed a barrier that had blocked the enemy's charge, but judging from its rapidly crumbling state, it wouldn't hold for long. "Quick! Water clones!" she commanded. "Roger!" chorused her fellow Chunin beside her, as they all formed nearly 24 water clones that now ran alongside them. Within a few seconds, they reached their wounded comrades. As the water clones started carrying the wounded back up the mountain, Ukina saw the first major crack in the barrier erected by her captain. She looked at her captain and saw he looked prepared to in order to protect the retreat of his shattered force. "Where the hell are the reinforcements?" yelled one of her Chunin comrades angrily. "There were none," whispered Ukina sadly, realizing the lie they had all been led to believe by the village elders. A resounding explosion jolted the young Uzumaki out of her despair. As she and her fellow Chunin glanced forward once more, they were shocked to see one ship of the enemy fleet explode into thousands of pieces courtesy of a devastating blast that tore it apart. Before even a single gasp could escape from her lips, Ukina saw more and more of the enemy ships being blown to shreds without any mercy. There was a strange buzzing sound in the air, and looking up, her eyes widened even further when she saw nearly a dozen humanoid figures falling towards them from the skies. In the blink of an eye, the new arrivals zoomed towards the enemy forces on the ground and unleashed a rain of paper bombs strapped across sharp and nimble kunai, being launched at a frightening speed from the weapons in the hands of these airborne troops. The front line of the enemy force was torn to shreds, while sending most of their remaining troops sailing backwards. Many didn't get back up. Ukina and the remaining Uzumaki felt a flicker of hope being reborn in their hearts and could only watch in stunned silence as the new arrivals did a low flyby several feet above the ground, where they again launched a salvo of kunai at the few Junin that were attempting to rally the disarrayed enemy forces. They avoided the incoming barrage with ease, only to catch sight of a blonde flash that disappeared before they could even blink. Ukina flinched when the same warrior appeared in front of the Uzumaki forces in a defensive position. To her horror, the targeted enemy officers' heads rolled down to the ground, instantly crushing the morale of the remaining troops under their command. The masked blonde warrior raised his hand, making his comrades land around him as the wings across their backs shrunk into an extremely comfortable small size. First platoon, with me. Formation 5. He commanded in a fierce voice that expected nothing but obedience. He glanced back at Ukina's group, making her flinch when she saw how red his eyes were. Most of all, the coldness and hatred in them unnerved her. Second platoon, tend to our wounded and keep the rest safe, ordered the blonde. The troops in black-colored uniforms moved in unison on those orders, with half of them separating into respective groups in one swift motion. The ones that surrounded the dangerous blonde reloaded the weapons in their hands as he unleashed his sword. Ukina felt courage flow through her and stepped forward to help her comrades, only to be stopped by Captain Daisuke and the Junins that had now retreated towards their position. Let the Spartans handle this, child, advised the old Uzumaki in a compassionate voice. Daisuke, I never imagined the higher-ups would deploy Spartans as our reinforcements. It seems the gods have not abandoned us yet, praised another veteran Junin in relief. Ukina could not fault the man when she saw the swift and effective way in which the Spartans were tending to their wounded while few others formed a defensive perimeter. The group at the front with the blonde was ready and unleashed their first volley of kunai at the enemy instantly. The blonde vanished before her eyes, only to appear amidst the dodging enemy troops that were trying to avoid the storm of sharp kunai sailing all around them. CQC. The Spartans from the blonde's group placed their kunai launchers on their backs on hearing the command from one of their own. They equipped themselves with the twin swords on their backs and quickly channeled their chakra through the blades, giving them a glowing aura. Unlike the blonde, who was using teleportation technique of some hidden nature, his men charged forward into the ongoing melee battle in the traditional manner with their speed, leaving almost everyone scrambling to get away from their path. Those that dared to oppose were skewed in half when the Spartan force tore clean through them. Ukina had never seen a gruesome battle as this in her short life, as heads, limbs, weapons and screams started flying across the entire battlefield. It was clear even for her that the Spartans were much faster, more and determined to win at any cost. A resolve that the enemy troops, now devoid of their officers, severely lacked. It was no surprise when many broke ranks and started to flee, earning a wave of approving roars and cheers from the Uzumaki forces in the area. K them all. Ukina grimaced when the Spartans brought forth the kunai launchers once more and aimed in the direction of the broken enemy force currently fleeing for their lives. Fire! A volley of kunai put an end to that struggle forever. The battlefield fell silent save for the moans of the handful enemy wounded mixed with the Uzumaki, only for the blonde to walk towards each of the enemy wounded and put a K right between their eyes. The gruesome was not something she could accept just yet, but Ukina saw none of the Spartans looked away, nor did many of her fellow comrades who had nothing but hate in their hearts for the people that wanted to take their freedom away. She instead turned to look at the skies in order to not look at what the blonde was doing. It was necessary but too brutal. She saw another dozen Spartan warriors flying towards them with the help of their winged devices, this group being led by a masked redhead. Both groups decided to meet up near the foot of the Fujima Mountains, and Ukina was quite surprised when the cold-hearted blonde Spartan ran forward and hugged the redhead, much to the younger boy's embarrassment. However, that affectionate gesture put many of the other Uzumaki at ease, including Ukina, who couldn't help but see the contrast before their eyes. Mere moments ago, this boy was nothing more than a brutal K-machine, and now he was just someone worried about a fellow comrade. It put a human face behind those scary gas masks. Even now, the villagers and the shinobi forces still didn't know much about the Spartans. They were fellow patriots who were exceptionally talented and powerful beyond imagination, yet nobody knew the people behind those masks. It was to maintain the secret of their identities, and there were some rumors flowing around that the higher-ups had carried out brutal experiments on many children who had volunteered for a special program few years back. And the result was now looking at them in the form of Spartan warriors. If her guess was correct, these warriors should be in their early teens, and yet they looked to be in their late teens with their enhanced body frames and muscle tissue. You do know IK more than you today, teased the redhead playfully, earning a scoff from the blonde Spartan. You just like to blow us up, muttered the blonde in a sulky tone. Ukina's doubts became reality when she heard the young voices which didn't fit with their older B. The blonde had the tone of someone her age or close to it at least. She had a feeling they could pretend to change their voices if required, but it was still astonishing to witness nonetheless. A bet is a bet. I blew up the enemy fleet, thereby an entire battalion waiting in reserve along with their sailors. That makes my K count higher than yours on this battlefield. Time to pay up on our bet, said the redhead with a jovial laugh. You do know how expensive that manga is to buy? Asked the blonde with playful tears running down his cheeks, as he grabbed the redhead's shoulders pleadingly. Yep, that's why you're the one paying for it from your own pocket, retorted the redhead victoriously, making the blonde slump in defeat with a dark cloud hovering above him. Ukina and the others could only watch in amusement as the two Spartans whose auras dwarfed the others significantly continued to argue back and forth about shonen manga, a unique way of storytelling prevalent among their village since its inception. Many renowned stories and writers had been born through this art form, and a large portion of their fellow citizens actively subscribed to it. It was a booming business, with many of the friendly nations also sometimes requesting these services to be extended to their people. Another female redhead appeared beside the sulking blonde Spartan, bopping him on the head, albeit playfully. Come on, you know you want to read more about Owen again. Don't you? She teased playfully. I still don't understand why you are such a fangirl of him. Levi is more cooler, scolded the redhead boy and smiled on seeing the fire that lit in the blonde's eyes. Shut your whore mouth. There is nobody better than Owen F. Smith, defended the blonde fiercely, with righteous fury burning in his eyes. Captain Daisuke's light cough interrupted the fierce debate, making the Spartans look at the older man, who gave them an amused smile and a grateful bow, which was soon replicated by his surviving fighters. The Spartans were surprised but thumped their fists against their hearts, which was what people had now came to recognize as their official salute. You totally stole this from the manga, elder brother, whispered the redhead mischievously. Shut it. No harm in it if our people are not objecting to it, retorted the blonde with a blush. Duh. You think they have a choice? Teased the female redhead, much to the blonde's added embarrassment when he saw their fellow countrymen trying to hide their smirks and smiles. You guys are terrible. 2 days later, Nagato Uzumaki stepped across the beach near the village alongside Kushina and other fellow Spartans now that they were officially given some shore leave from the constant missions they had been engaged in. There was an excited smile on his face as he held in his hands the latest manga volume of his favorite series that his brother had subscribed and paid for courtesy of their bet. Speaking of him, Nagato found his elder sibling standing at the shore and just peacefully staring at the morning sunrise that was about to happen any time now. A holler of cheers erupted from their comrades as they rushed towards the water happily. Kushina pleaded with him to join them, but he waved her off and instead walked towards his brother. When he stepped beside his half-brother, he saw a peaceful yet melancholic look on his face. Together they watched their comrades go wild in the sea water, their shrieks of joy and laughter a much more welcoming sound to the screams of dying people that they heard almost every day, mostly due to their own hands. It's beautiful, elder brother, said Nagato with a happy smile, as he saw the first rays of the sun pierce through the dark clouds. Yeah, it is, agreed Minato in a whisper. What's on your mind? Asked Nagato with a knowing look on his face as he sensed something troubling his sibling. I have been named as the leader of the Spartans. Nagato was stunned. Granted, it had been quite some time since they graduated from the program and the leadership had divided them into small groups fighting on different fronts under various leaders. It was meant to give them experience and also see who among them was more suited to leadership than others. Suffice to say, 10 names had came up and those included the two brothers. Yet a small part of Nagato felt disheartened on not being chosen, a feeling which didn't go unnoticed by his brother. You wanted to be captain, stated Minato calmly. Yes, answered Nagato honestly, no point denying something like this when his brother had clearly seen through him. I asked him to choose you who are the strongest Spartan, revealed the blonde, but saw it wasn't enough for his brother who as expected decided to change the topic to avoid an argument. Did the Azukage bring you to this beach? Asked Nagato hesitantly, drawing a curious glance from his brother. He did. He asked me as to what do I see beyond the ocean, said Nagato with a faint smile, and was quite surprised when his brother's eyes widened. He asked me the same thing as well. Creepy old bastard, muttered Minato, earning a hearty chuckle from his younger brother. I told him I hoped to someday see a world free of war beyond the ocean. A world with which we could live in peace, answered Nagato honestly. It's a beautiful world that you dream of, said Minato hesitantly. What did you tell him, elder brother? What do you truly see beyond the ocean? asked Nagato curiously. The blonde's fists clenched and the hatred in his eyes was a mirror reflection of his heart. Enemies. What lies beyond the sea are enemies and we must kill them all if our people are to ever be safe. It's the only way to survive this cruel world of shinobi, answered Minato bitterly, his thoughts still lingering over the fate that befell their parents. Even at the cost of your humanity. Even if it means becoming the very same monsters that you sought to exterminate. Even if it means becoming a devil. Asked Nagato, his voice mixed with sadness and a hint of curiosity towards his siblings' vision of the world they lived in. The only one who can bring change is someone who can what they hold dearest, their humanity, their dreams, or their life. Mother achieved the strength to face an army to save our village and gave up her life in return. The Azuki chose the scorn of his people for creating us Spartans, yet that decision saved the lives of our shinobi. I'll gladly become a devil if it means securing the future of our people and for my family. That was my answer. He saw Nagato staring at him with a strange look on his face for a few fleeting seconds before giving him a gentle smile. I'll be honored to follow you into battle, Captain, promised Nagato. You're not angry with me? Asked Minato cautiously, but his brother shook his head in denial. I can see why the Azuki chose you. I may be the strongest and have bright dreams, but you have the will to turn them into reality. You are the shinobi that shall keep moving forward until the last enemies of our people are destroyed, no matter the cost. There could be nobody better suited to lead the Spartans, who are the hope and pride of our people, explained Nagato proudly. Minato blushed and looked away, earning an amused chuckle from his sibling as both brothers watched their comrades play in the ocean, with Kushina leading the most wild ones. Looking at their comrades, they could not help but realize just how much they had already to reach this far. Barely in their early teens, some even younger, most Spartans had been made to age a few years faster. Their B did not match with their age anymore, with many of them nearly 5.5 feet tall already, with broad frames courtesy of the genetic experiments and brutal training they had gone through. But even if their B had matured, their faces still held the fading glimpses of the children they once were. A painful reminder for the Azu villagers who felt responsible to an extent for this fate that befell upon the children for whom this village had been formed to protect. In that way, they had already their childhood for the sake of their village's freedom. Freedom and hatred. Nagato could clearly feel these two emotions burning inside his brother like a raging tornado, and unlike him, the blonde had never been able to move on or forgive himself for what happened to their parents. No matter what he did, he could never make his brother abandon those feelings and live in peace in the present, which was the best they could do given the world they lived in. Nagato, your brother is a stubborn fool. Stay by his side, promise me. He had made that vow to their mother all those years ago and felt himself smile when he thought of their last moments. A pledge that he upheld each day by making sure his lazy elder brother ate on time, didn't waste all his money on useless things, keeping annoying fangirls away from him among other things. Minato understood and valued those little things and tried to look after him in his own way. The blonde ensured they didn't end up on the street after their parents even if they weren't dirt poor, ensured Nagato was given the best of training, kept away the bullies during their younger years, regaled him with stories of his missions in the faraway lands as they fought this war, always volunteering for the most dangerous missions so that his little brother wouldn't have to take them and could survive this war even if Minato himself didn't. He caught sight of Kushina looking at his brother with a friendly smile, even going so far as to wave them both over once again. Nagato was more than happy to oblige, however was stopped when he saw his sibling was not inclined to follow. The conflict in the blonde's eyes easy enough for his younger brother to understand. Let's just enjoy this moment, elder brother, said Nagato with a pleasant smile, earning a resigned sigh from the blonde, though a faint smile did arrive on his lips. I never could say no to you, whispered Minato as he placed a comforting hand upon his brother's shoulder. They both raced towards the vast ocean to join their comrades, with Nagato instantly taking the lead by creating dark chakra wings across his back, much to his siblings' displeasure. Nagato felt satisfied on reaching the water first, only to find his brother standing right beside him, much to his bewilderment. He then glanced at the Harashan mark on his left shoulder. Gotcha. Both brothers couldn't contain their amusement and dissolved into cheerful laughter, only to be joined quickly by their comrades. Nagato watched his brother play water sports with some of the other Spartans as Kushina stepped beside him. It's been a while since I have seen him this happy, said Nagato contentedly, But Kushina didn't miss some concern which her fellow Uzumaki was trying hard to hide. What is it? She asked. Elder brother is chosen as our captain. Kushina was quite happy to hear that, as there was nobody more better suited for the task than Minato Namikaze. On the battlefield, he was decisive and swift. The ability to understand the situation and adapt to it was something he was better at than other Spartans. Most of all, there was no hesitation in his heart. He reminds me of his favorite hero from the manga, at least on the battlefield. Don't you think so? Asked Kushina curiously. Nagato blinked in surprise. It actually answered quite a few questions for whom even he didn't have answers till this date. The Battle of Aojika, a conflict that had happened 2 years ago and the event which started Minato's ascension to leadership. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the Namikaze had achieved victory by inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. He adapted his forces to the terrain and kept his strategy flexible. He also didn't hesitate to S his troops in kamikaze attacks whenever necessary and broke the enemy's morale. In the end, the blonde had allowed Danzo and his cronies to take full credit of the victory to maintain their alliance. Fierce, innovative, decisive, and bold, those were the pillars of his brother's leadership style. Those traits, the Spartan salute, the way in which his brother always kept some distance from fellow Spartans, unlike the emotional attachment he had towards Nagato and Kushina. In normal life, his brother was a completely different person, but Nagato could now see after whom his sibling had modeled himself as a fighter and a leader. I couldn't have picked a better role model, said Nagato with a proud smile. Just hope he doesn't start shouting Susumu, quipped Kushina, sarcasm dripping from her voice. Nagato laughed, as he could very well imagine his brother using that walkry under the right circumstances. Thunderous lightning rained from the skies amidst a heavy storm that drenched the island nation in its fury. Wild waves rushed from the sea towards a never-ending quest to conquer the land. On the beach stood the Azuchage, holding in his hands twin blades made of the finest steel in the world. With great pride and hope, he looked at the fully armed Spartan in front of him. Around them were each and every other Spartan, a witness to this moment of their village's history. Hanzo Uzumaki walked towards the blonde warrior, who respectfully knelt before him in the cold water without a flinch. The redhead Kage raised the sharp blades before placing each upon the Spartan's shoulder. Let the seas protecting our great nation and the shinobi that defend its freedom be witness to your oath, commanded Hanzo, making the blonde boy look at him with a determined gaze. I, Minato Namikaze, son of Yahiko Uzumaki, swear to defend the freedom of this great nation. I shall be the sword of my leaders and the shield of my people, pledged the blonde with conviction burning in his eyes. Minato saw his brother looking at him proudly, and for a moment he saw the shadows of their parents around him. Just for that fleeting second, he felt complete only for it to vanish. Yet instead of sorrow, it only brought him more conviction. He felt the weight of the blades upon his shoulders and what they truly meant. He couldn't allow this nation and its freedom to be threatened, for it was the dream for which his parents gave their lives. He saw the way in which his comrades looked at him, and for the first time he saw himself becoming something more in their eyes. Arise, Captain Fox. A fierce pair of red eyes gazed into the Azuchage's eyes as the boy got up and offered him the Spartan salute. A wave of cheers erupted from the Spartans around him as they rushed in to congratulate their new leader, and soon enough they had hoisted the blonde upon their shoulders for a victory march. Nagato watched the Azuchage step beside him as both of them saw the celebration in content. I've never seen him smile like this in a long time, said Nagato with a happy smile, as he watched his brother actually basking in the cheering and for once letting go of the guilt he always seemed to carry for something he had no control over. He's lucky to have a brother like you, praised the Azuchage kindly. I'm not the only one, said Nagato with a pleased smile. The Azuchage looked back at that strange remark and adopted a knowing smirk when he saw Minato standing in front of Kushina. Even an idiot could see the girl wanted nothing more than to K the blonde, but settled for only extending a handshake amongst the curious and few teasing gazes of fellow Spartans. Hug her, you fool. Hanzo chuckled when he barely heard the silent curse that escaped from Nagato's lips, and was further amused when Minato simply shook the girl's hand in a friendly manner. Idiots. The younger brother had enough of the antics and marched towards them purposefully and released his frustration by grabbing Minato and Kushina in a bear hug under his arms, earning amused chuckles and knowing looks from their comrades which only made the two idiots blush and look away. Minato sighed in relief as he crashed at the comfortable seats in the bar alongside his grinning brother. They chuckled on seeing Yamato and a few others tripping over themselves after the dozen crates of liquor they had consumed. Most of the others had already passed out after their wild party, all paid for by the Azukichi himself as a personal thanks for their service to the village. That was fun, said Minato with a contented sigh. I guess it was, agreed Nagato wholeheartedly, as he smoked some very contraband stuff. Nagato merely rolled his eyes at his brother's shocked expression on seeing him smoke what was essentially just green plants. Strange how everything seemed so simple right now. It was so simple that even his usual by-the-book rule-abiding brother actually requested some for himself. Not that this can keep either of us whacked for long, justified Minato with a sheepish smile. Nagato chuckled at that fact since their genetically enhanced B usually processed toxins of any kind pretty quickly and especially in his older brother's case who had a very fast metabolism. To Captain Fox, toasted Nagato, as he passed the joint to his brother who accepted the same with a fake gracious bow. They both settled for enjoying the peace now that most of their comrades were knocked out cold from their ridiculous rave party with only the most craziest ones still going at it like there was no tomorrow. Where's Kushina? Asked Minato curiously. Nagato snorted which earned him a curious glance from the blonde. The redhead felt quite bold in part due to his high state and the casual look his brother was giving him despite knowing deep down that both idiots had some feelings for each other. She had been by their side from the very start and had never left ever since. Nagato would be lying if he didn't consider Kushina as one of his closest friends who had looked out for them all these years. Nearly everybody except his brother could see how much the girl liked him. Nagato loved his brother but his lack of ability to notice the obvious in this case irritated him. No, more than that it was his brother's fear of getting emotionally attached to anyone else after the death of their parents worried the redhead. Something broke inside his brother the night their mother and he had never been the same after. He got a lot more protective of his last family and always maintained some distance from everyone else. Kushina came close to breaking that wall he had put between his heart and the rest of the world, only to be pushed away time and time away. Tonight had been the final straw and his brother still didn't realize his mistake or didn't want to think about it. Nagato was not going to have any of that foolishness anymore. Left after watching how cozy you were getting while dancing with Matsuri, snapped the redhead. He enjoyed watching his brother wince for a moment only to feel bad when the blonde looked guilty earning a comforting pat from his sibling. We are shinobi, elder brother. Our future is uncertain, for once try to listen to your heart, admonished Nagato with a tired sigh. I'm her commanding officer, protested Minato, only to receive an exasperated look from his brother. Like the Azukichi cares, truth is he doesn't as long as it doesn't affect our duties. She cares about you and I know you like her, pointed Nagato flatly. We're just friends and it's perfectly normal for us to care about each other, Minato tried to reason. Oh, if you're just friends then why did you refuse Matsuri's advances for tonight? Why instead of talking about anything else, you asked me where Kushina was and just for a moment you winced a little on hearing she went home after seeing some other Kanoiki getting cozy with you, scolded Nagato. Minato grimaced at that harsh remark and couldn't help but feel guilty again. They had been in this fight together for years, always watching each other's backs. She was the one that was most happy on hearing of his promotion and the pride in her eyes at that beach was something he had greatly cherished. He had wanted nothing more than to carry her right there only for his fear of experiencing any more pain to stop him. She deserves better. His last resort at denial earned him a smack from his brother who only went on to give him a look. Nagato. Mother wanted you to be happy, elder brother. Please fulfill her wish. Nagato hated himself for using the same emotional blackmail route for guilt-tripping his brother into doing something that would bring him happiness. The Azukichi had used it for the village's benefit, and the younger redhead's only saving grace was the fact that his brother liked Kushina too, judging from the way he always looked at her when he thought nobody was watching. But Nagato had and wanted nothing more than for Kushina to truly become a part of their family. It was lonely enough with just him and his brother. He bore the furious glare that Minato gave him for that remark before the blonde swiftly stomped off right outside the bar. Hopefully he wouldn't be too mad when Nagato saw him again. Kushina returned to her apartment completely exhausted. It was way past midnight and some of the Spartans were still celebrating at the party thrown by their new captain. Nagato had introduced everyone to heavy drinking matches, and it had only gotten out of control, with young teenagers having the strength of near adults, at least physically. She herself had enjoyed the evening to the fullest, even managing to steal a dance with Minato. Everything had been going so well, they had been so close to each other, and she was sure her heart was not the only one that was beating at an alarming pace in that moment. She was not mistaken or imagining things, as she had seen Minato lean towards her during the dance for just a moment to kei her, only to be interrupted by that B. Matsuri. The other Spartan, Kunoiki, had nearly demanded a dance for herself, and Minato had been too polite to decline, unaware or not caring of Kushina's own feelings. She had not missed his surprise or his relief at that interruption, and had allowed Matsuri to explore his body more than necessary during the dance. It was as if he was pushing her away deliberately, despite knowing that she had some feelings for him, and maybe he had some for her as well. It was too much to bear, and she had walked away. She tensed when a knock sounded on her door. On instinct she channeled her chakra and was shocked on realizing the chakra of the person outside. She hesitantly opened the door, only to see him standing there, completely drenched in the heavy rain falling from the skies. Minato. He shivered a tiny fraction when a cold gust of wind passed through them, and it made her spring into action. She quickly made him come inside and made him grab a seat on the couch. Within seconds, a fresh towel was thrown his way, and she rushed into the kitchen to make some hot coffee, just the right thing to warm him up and also something he really liked to have. The blonde could only watch in silent admiration as she brought them 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He had dried himself by then, even divesting himself of the useless shirt, leaving him topless. He saw her blush, but the way in which she chose not to comment any further went to show his brother might have been right about this. He really felt extremely comfortable in her company, and she understood him on a level he didn't think her to be capable of. Kushina instead focused on making sure he had his coffee, and only when he was finished and his body was suitably warm, did she look at him curiously. Always putting me ahead of your own desires. I'm not an easy person to deal with, yet you have stuck with me this long. I am thankful for that, he said hesitantly. In hindsight, he should have thought of a plan before appearing at her doorstep. You didn't have to come all this way to say this. We're friends and we look out for each other, she replied casually, trying very hard not to get her hopes up. She saw him mutter something incoherent before he looked at her with fear, determination and affection in his eyes. I want us to be more. Kushina went ghostly pale on hearing those precious words spoken barely in a whisper. It was all she had wanted for a long time, yet something made her stop the rising happiness and look at him seriously. Are you sure about this? She asked, in a last effort to offer him a way out. She had a feeling this confession had been put into action to some extent by a certain redhead who was going to be worse than S if this exploded in her face. No. Few months later, Minato found himself standing inside the Azukage's office alongside his brother and few of the other more experienced Spartans like Kushina. Their Kage alongside his counselors looked at them for a few long moments before explaining the reason behind summoning him at such a late hour. As you're aware, ever since the fall of the first Reikage few weeks ago, the embers of conflict between our villages were dwindling. Lord Hokage and the new second Reikage were even trying to negotiate a ceasefire, the effects of which you have clearly seen due to the reduced number of battles these past few days between Konoha and Azu with Kumo. To finalize a peace deal, a summit was organized 2 days ago between the 2 Kages, revealed the Azukage seriously. Kumogakur can't be trusted. Hashirama is a fool if he thinks those bastards will honor any peace deal for a long time. It's just a ruse to rebuild their forces that have suffered great losses and start another war, protested Minato fiercely, gaining a satisfied look from the elder Uzumakis in the room. I'm afraid you are right, son. I am sad to report that the summit was attacked by the Kinkaku and other shinobi loyal to the first Reikage. Additional details are still being confirmed, but what we do know is as follows: the second Reikage was Hashirama was captured, and this failure has in turn increased the possibility of the war prolonging, which is something that we cannot afford at any cost, revealed the Azukage. The Spartans grimaced. It was true that while they had been successful in defending their island nation from Kumogakur, but they had suffered heavy losses. Nearly half of their ninja force was either S or I, the rest were either not the best, were inexperienced or just too young. The only reason they had survived this long was due to the enemy concentrating majority of its vast forces and tailed beasts to the war on the Land of Fire's borders, leaving Azu with just the task of defending itself instead of taking part in the heavy fighting. The Uzumaki clan had tried to honor this respite by aiding their staunch allies through Spartan support for various offensive operations throughout the war and helping with supplies. If Hashirama was used to put that crucial ally out of the war, Azu was doomed. No matter how skilled the Spartans were, they and what was left of their village's forces could not hope to defeat the entirety of the Land of Lightning's military, civilian and shinobi alike should they descend upon the tiny island nation. The Azuchage was satisfied on seeing his troops arrive at the same conclusion that their leadership had. Hashirama has to be rescued, said Minato bitterly. Yes, Konoha would probably buckle if Kumo threatens Hashirama's life. We can't have that. For all their military might, they don't have a paramilitary force that can infiltrate deep behind enemy lines and rescue Hashirama, stated one of the elders without hesitation. Minato clenched his fist shut when he saw the Azuchage pointing at the area on the map where they suspected Hashirama was being held prisoner. It was deep behind enemy lines, far away from the sea or friendly borders, in an area full of dangerous mountains and unfamiliar terrain. Their intelligence unit barely had been able to put together a general summary of the terrain and possible enemy presence. The unknown variables were too great for his instincts to just ignore. The elders either didn't seem to care or worse were perfectly aware of the risks. He didn't want to consider which was the worst outcome. What about reinforcements? It will not be easy locating Hashirama in such a vast area in time. Say that we are able to pull such a miracle, it's foolish to assume he would be lightly guarded. We can take on scores of ninjas on our own, but the Kinkaku would be real trouble should they be present there. It could backfire and get the hostage alongside us, protested Nagato, his voice having a certain edge that earned him a glare from the elders. Then we are glad that you were not chosen as the Spartan leader, boy. Such pessimism does not suit a true shinobi, snapped Miza Uzumaki in her tart voice. Says the hag that sits behind a desk. The older woman's eyes widened at that insult but was silenced into submission by one cold glance of the Azuchage, who then went on to give the same look to the young Uzumaki in front of him. Miza may have chosen the wrong words, but she did say the truth. It's not up to you to decide, Nagato. That decision lies with Captain Minato Namikaze. I can order you to do it, but you know it needs to be done, don't you, Minato? Asked the Azuchage with a resigned look on his face. The Spartans and the elders both looked at the blonde for an answer and watched him sigh before looking at their village leader without any fear. I won't lead my men into this mission without assured reinforcements should we encounter serious danger. Kushina smiled and saw Nagato giving the elders a smug look. All eyes then turned towards the Azuchage, who looked into the blonde's fierce stare before nodding. Very well. 5th Battalion shall be stationed near the borders for your support should the need arise. One of the elders got up from their seat and bowed before leaving to carry out the said command from their leader. We'll get him back, promised Minato, earning firm nods from the Spartans. I know you don't like the man, Minato. Even I don't agree with many of his decisions and hate that those actions placed us in this situation. Yet this must be done, for the sake of our nation's future. Too many people have for that to go in vain. Nagato and the other Spartans saluted their village leader, following the cue of their captain, who now looked determined to see this mission through against all odds. The younger Uzumaki despised the way in which the Azuchage had just manipulated his brother by playing on his self-induced guilt and pain over their parents who protecting this village. But the decision was made. Minato swiftly turned around and marched outside the office, making his comrades follow after him. Only once they were gone did Miza Uzumaki turn towards the Azuchage with a shrewd look on her face. 5th Battalion was nearly wiped out last week, Hanzo. The Azuchage aged nearly a decade on being reminded of that well-kept secret that they had hidden from their struggling village, and closed his eyes for a few long moments before looking back at his fellow clansmen with a resigned gaze. All the more reason this needs to be done by the Spartans. Minato found himself standing in the briefing room after having just now finished the explanation of their upcoming mission to his various platoon leaders. Suffice to say, none of them looked confident about their odds or the nearly impossible task given to them. Captain, this is too risky even for us, said Hayato Uzumaki, the leader of the finest trackers amongst the Spartans. I second that. If we are discovered before we find the hostage, the enemy could very well KO him to prevent us from rescuing him. No matter our efforts or justification for the failure, Konoha would not take it lightly. Knowing how subservient our leadership is towards the Senju clan, it wouldn't be a surprise if they offered our heads as a necessary to appease those Senjus, warned Kasumi Uzumaki, the leader of the most dangerous Spartan marksmen. Her mistrust towards the leadership had always vexed quite a few of her comrades, but today there were no arguments being made against her warnings. All of what you say is true, but the fact remains that we have to do this or we will doom our village to destruction eventually. There is no choice, whispered Kushina Uzumaki, the leader of the most skilled close-quarter combat specialists. There are no easy choices here. We shall follow your lead like always, Captain. You have not let us down once, reassured Nagato Uzumaki, the leader of the Spartan scouts and assassins. The Spartan captain glanced at his 4 sub-commanders, each having raised their own opinions and concerns. They were all right in their own way, and in the end it all fell down to his choice. The risks were enormous, but if they backed down, they gave Kumogakure a chance to actually win this war. If that happened, all the throughout the years and the death of his parents and fellow comrades would go in vain. We cannot stop until the last of our enemies are destroyed. The fate of our nation depends on it. We swore to risk everything we had for the sake of our people, our families. We cannot fail them, said Minato fiercely. But, a cold pair of red eyes silenced any dissent in Kasumi Uzumaki's voice as a chill went down her spine. The decision has been made. Obey the chain of command. 4 fists thumped against their respective hearts as the platoon leaders rose in unison to give the Spartan salute in acknowledgement of his command. They may either agree or disagree on the decisions of this mission, but what they couldn't ignore were the orders of their commanding officers. Even if they were nearly being sent on a mission. Their only solace was the trust they had in each other's abilities and the successful track record of their captain, who had never failed a mission before against any odds. As long as he was there to lead them, they might just be able to pull this through. Midnight. The entire Spartan force stood at the ready in front of their captain, who inspected them once before giving a satisfactory nod of approval on seeing they all looked ready to complete the task assigned to them. Minato himself looked at his flexible winged device, forward, and other important gear only to find everything to be in place. He looked back at his grizzled veterans and was glad to see they didn't need any speeches. They had been through enough battles to make them ready to face any obstacle the missions might throw upon them. It was what they were trained to do. He looked back at his village, and his desire to see this through only rose further as the sight of their home reminded him of the made by their parents to protect it. Advance. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.